Hi there. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you all here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph, and I am the host of this show. So, we're starting a new mini series today. I've been talking about this off and on for the past couple of years. It's not that it's taken me that long to put it together. I was basically just thinking about how I wanted to present it, what aspect of it that I want to talk about, what aspects don't I want to talk about, and then who to include in it, and then also what the title is and what direction I wanted to go in with it. So it's taken me a while to get to there. I've chosen the 7 artists that I want to kind of go on a little bit about. So basically, this series is going to be called "They Got It Started." So basically, this is going back to the 1950s and talking about those rock artists that contributed a lot to that time period and kind of set the stages for a lot of stuff going forward. So they were influential or they were idolized by a lot of the bands that came after, or they may have started the genre, or they were the first at this or the first at that, all kinds of different possibilities here. So when looking for the artist, I wanted the artist to be artist, of course, first and foremost, that I had to be familiar with and actually liked. There's no point in doing something on somebody you don't like or you're not familiar with because it just won't have the same effect. So I picked 7 based on that. Plus, I wanted them to be people that would be fairly well known and people could see the connection between them and others going forward. And of course, all the artists I chose today, I have had some doing with, some listening with. My parents, of course. My dad was pretty much a country western guy. That was pretty much all he liked to listen to. My mother was more of a, I guess you would call it an early rock person. She liked that 50s rock. She liked that sound. She did like the country western too, but I don't think that was her main focus when I think about the music she would often listen to. So I chose the 7 artists I did based on all of that criteria. So we're going to go forward now. So I've picked out 7. So today we're going to start with the most obvious person to start with when going back to the 1950s. Yeah, I think we have to start with the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. He played vocals. Well, he was a vocalist primarily as a singer, and he did play some guitar and piano, but he liked to, like a lot of his songs, liked to focus on the guitar as the main instrument, which was kind of different because guitar often was not a main instrument in that time period. Some genres, country western aside, there was more guitar dominated in that than there was in some of the other genres. But primarily, I think piano, orchestral music, that kind of stuff was more prominent and more dominant in most of the genres. But guitar was more of the instrument that he put forth and pushed for, I guess, is the best way to describe it. So I'm going to give you some basic information about Elvis Presley. This is not a historical episode. I'm not doing history. I leave that to the historical experts, people who are really good at that. And there's lots of them out there. My job is I just want to get to the music and talk about the music. So, but you got to give people a little bit about the guy in case they didn't know. And I can't imagine people don't know very much about Elvis Presley. However, we'll get to that now. So Elvis was born on January the 8th, 1935, and he died on August the 16th, 1977 at the age of 42. And he's buried in Graceland in Tennessee. So basically, he was born in Mississippi, I believe, and he passed away in Tennessee. The genres that he's most noted for: rock and roll, pop, rockabilly, country, gospel, rhythm and blues, and soul. Those are the ones that he delved in during his career. For me, I think of Elvis as a pretty much a rock and roll artist, but I think to me he's kind of one of the forefront people of rockabilly. Kind of that genre kind of started with him in some ways. So The story goes that he was having a hard time getting on the radio with the R&B people because they thought he sounded too much like country music. And then, of course, the country people wouldn't let him on the country western stations because he sounded too much like R&B. So he couldn't win. But he mixed them very well together, and that to me is the beginning, the kind of the beginning of rockabilly. So you might call it pre-rockabilly, or the beginnings of rockabilly. So Elvis Presley's number one hits, he had 17 or 18, I guess, depending on what source you look at and how they view it. Some of them view only stuff that came on the radio station. Some viewed both sides of the singles album or single release. So basically it was 17 or 18, and that's in the US. In the UK, he had as many as 21 number one hit singles. For albums, he sold almost 500, or a little over 500 million albums, which is very high. Not very many people have achieved that level. His first album was his first rock album, which was a self-titled debut album, which went to number one. It was the first, I guess it's historically considered the first number one rock album in history. That's what I've read, and I tend to believe that's possible. That's probably possible. He was after he went off to the war. He was drafted and went to the war. After he came back, well, I don't know if he was. I didn't actually go to the war. I think he actually was just in the service. And after his service time was over, he came out and he started making movies. So he kind of got out of the music album making career a little bit, even though I still think he was making albums. But he was pretty much now at this point in as a movie star. And I believe he made, I didn't write it down, but I think it was 33 either movies or concerts, or a concert show or a movie. Probably the most famous is Jailhouse Rock. That's the one I remember anyways. And that was, I think, his third movie. But basically, so he was a movie actor for most of the 60s, and then kind of left that a little bit, started coming back to the music industry a bit, and started making more stuff. So he started his career in 1954 at Sun Records, which I think wasn't called Sun Records at the time, but that's where he got his start. It's funny how they viewed him, eh? Everybody looks at people, it depends on what angle you're looking at somebody from, the beginning angle or the back angle. You look at them totally different. In that time period, a lot of them thought he really wasn't that good of a singer. I don't know if that was jealousy or they just didn't listen to his voice in the same manner that they were listening to other musicians. That makes more sense to me, because in that time period, you had people like Hank Snow and Hank Williams and that the like, and their voices are very different from Elvis's. Elvis almost had a lot smoother voice than either of them. So maybe they viewed him as not having that good of a voice for those reasons. I don't really know. I haven't read a lot of Elvis Presley books. I basically get my knowledge from some stuff I've read online and from my parents. That's where I've gotten most of my knowledge from. His first single was Heartbreak Hotel, released in January of 1956. He was the first artist to do a concert that was viewed by the entire world, and he did that in Hawaii. His band, the band that he initially had that did most of the stuff up till when he went into the Army, they had a name, but geez, I can't remember what it was. Anyways, it was Elvis's first band. He played guitar and sang. Winfield Scotty Moore, he was basically the lead guitarist in the band. Billy Black played the bass, and Billy Black actually played the stand-up bass because I don't think they had an electric bass at that particular time. And then you had DJ Fontana on the drums. What many people don't know, and I was actually surprised by this because I didn't know a lot of his back history, but I thought it was one One fact that I thought was worth mentioning is that he was born a twin. He was the second of the two twins. The first twin came out 35 minutes earlier than him and was stillborn. So he was an only, well, he didn't have a twin brother at the time, but he was born a twin. He also received the Presidential Medal of Honor. Presidential Medal of Freedom, not honor, freedom. Big difference. So those are the facts that I thought were interesting about him. But now I want to spend most of the rest of the time here talking about his music. This particular video, it's the first of the mini-series, so it's going to be a bit longer because I had to kind of introduce how I'm going to go about this. So his music, to me, when I think of Elvis Presley, I think of a guy who was primarily a ballad singer. That's what we would call them now, but back then they were love songs. So he sang a lot of love songs. He had some rockin' songs like Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock, and he had some country songs. So to me, those are the three kind of eras of his music that, or three styles of his music that I think were predominant. Of course, he did do other stuff. He did do some R&B. He did do some gospel. Of course, he did some soul stuff as well, but he also did some rockabilly, which is to me a kind of a combination of rock and country western. So anyways, so most of the stuff I listened to was more of the ballads and more of the rock and roll stuff, because that's the stuff my mother mostly listened to. And for me, I always thought he had a decent voice. He had the style. Of course, his stage show was, maybe the beginnings of that stage show stuff that so many other bands got into. So then I kind of separate rock musicians into the ones who are more music oriented and the music is everything, and others that are more of the entertainment and more of the stage show stuff. And he definitely was in both, actually, but I think he was a little bit more in the stage show. He was known for a while as Elvis the Pelvis, which I think he didn't really like that phrase, but you get what you get, right? So for me, he made many albums, had a lot of great songs, and definitely going forward, especially in the 60s, a lot of bands were influenced by him going into the 60s. Not just rock bands either, but a lot of these modern day pop singers and people that are into rockabilly and people who are into country western, that were all kind of influenced. The earlier artists were influenced by his style, I think. You can see it when you listen to them, especially the stage presentation, which was very important to his image. So that's my take. My first episode today was on Elvis Presley. If I had to give you a favorite song by Elvis, I would probably say it's probably got to be Hound Dog, or maybe Caught in a Trap, whatever the name of that song is. Both of those two songs I like quite a bit. So those are the two I would probably say are my favorites. If we're going to end on a positive note, those are the two I would choose. So anyways, please hit the like and subscribe. If you want to make any comments about Elvis, about any of his music, or comment on anything I've said, you can do that in the comment section below. Or you can put somebody you think might be an artist that had a big impact on early rock and got it all started. So take care, have yourself a good day and a good evening. Goodbye here from the Prog Monster.